Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Let's implement the last two views, which are progress button as well as text input. Let's go ahead and create the progress button. We need in this particular progress button state of is loading as well as the action that should be triggered whenever we click on this particular button. Content that should be within this button. It has to be a view, tint color and the background color. And we need the shape for the button shape. It should be here a generic type of type shape. And we need the width of this particular button and accessibility identifier for testing. Let's create here the public initializer. It's going to be just a simple wrapper around button view. We're just hoisting the action. When it's going to be disabled is loading. Accessibility identifier for the padding 8 for the frame width. The background, if it's loading, we're going to apply a certain opacity, background color, and opacity is loading 0.7, otherwise it has to be 1. For the clip shape, it has to be the shape that we have defined from the parameter. I would like to add here the circular progress indicator as well as the contents of the button. H-stack for the alignment center. Now, if it's loading, we're gonna show the progress indicator. I don't think that we're gonna need it in the end-to-end test. And we have to put here the contents that we want to show. And for the whole thing, we have to apply a certain opacity according to is loading to maintain the same style. As you can see here, it's very simple. I'm going to preview this progress button preview. All right. So I'm gonna create here a state or a private state. I'm gonna call it is loading. For is loading, it's gonna be assigned is loading. For the action, what we will do here, we'll try to simulate a little bit the process is loading and toggle. First of all, going to change from false to true by doing toggle. And we will use dispatch queue main and async after just to delay a little bit the next toggle of the is loading. Now plus let's do, I don't know, 1 second. And inside we will do is loading and toggle. For the accessibility identifier, it should be optional. A text. For the foreground color, let's change it on theme and on primary, background color, primary. Width 200. You can add here shadow if you will, medium. Now let's click on the progress button. Now for the next component, which is the last one, text input. It has to be reusable as well. For the text input, it's going to be a little bit complicated to implement because we need to distinguish between two cases. For the normal text input, in our case, the email and the name and whatnot, and the secured one. For the password, it's not like Jetpack Compose, you're just going to specify some parameters in order to choose between whether it's going to be shown or not, or just a normal text field. Under SwiftUI and basically and WPF, those are two separate components. For the normal text field, it should be called, it is the text field. And for the other one, it is secure field. Let's go ahead and create an enum for this. Input type. And let's add here the initializer. I'm gonna surround everything within group. And if it's input type equal text, we're going to use here the text field. Otherwise, we will use the secure field. Let's define the first one, text field, and let's hoist the needed parameters. First of all, I don't need actually the label, so I'm gonna mark it with empty string. And for the text, we're going to add here a binding. For the text, let's call it, for example, value. We're going to define it later on. For the prompt, it is basically the label that should be displayed. It's gonna be a normal text, and I'm gonna put here label. Going to define it later on. Font, body, medium, and the foreground color, secondary. I would like to disable the auto correction, auto capitalization to never, and that's all for the text field. Let's go ahead and create the needed dependencies, the binding as well as the label, and let's add those to the initializer of this particular component or this particular view. Now let's secure, or let's use the secure field. I don't need a label here. For the text, value, let's customize the prompt. I'm going to disable the autocorrection as well as the input auto capitalization, and text content type I'm gonna put here null. We're going to consider this as one single view or one merged view, if you will, to specify the common customization for this text input. For example, focused, the keyboard type, the function that's going to be triggered whenever we submit the, or to click on the virtual keyboard, and for example, the accessibility identifier, the foreground, and so on. I'm going to start here with focused to observe the focus change. I'm going to name it here as a binding. We're going to create it later on. For the keyboard type, let's hoist it to keyboard type. Whenever the value changes, under on change of value, gonna hoist this to something like on change, and we have to observe the value of its focus. And whenever we are submitting, what you have to do underneath, let's place the accessibility identifier and the foreground on background. All right, let's define those needed parameters. The focus state is focused, and we need the keyboard type of type UI keyboard type on submit and on change. Let's add those to the initializer is focused state, and we have to specify here the type of this, it's boolean, and it is a binding equal null. On change and on submit, let's initialize those, and we have to create here the keyboard type of type UI keyboard type. Let's do by default, let's add here comma, and keyboard type equal keyboard type. Let's add here the onFocus change as well as the accessibility identifier. OnFocus change, the accessibility identifier. Let's add onFocus change to init, and let's add the accessibility identifier as an optional parameter. Let's initialize the accessibility identifier as well as the onFocus change. And we need to add another button to clear the text field as well as a progress indicator if we have an ongoing process, and a trailing icon, and a feedback message for validation. I'm gonna surround this with hstack to put here basically leading icon as an optional parameter. Same for the clearable button that's gonna be placed to clear the text input, as well as the trailing icon name. Leading icon name as well as trailing icon name, whether it should have the clearable button or the clear button that we have seen under Vue3 application, is processing, basically whether to show the progress indicator or not. Trailing icon and clearable, we have to click on this particular views to trigger some action. Therefore, going to declare the needed functions or the callback functions. Trailing icon click, on clearable click, whenever we click on the clear icon or the clear button, icons color. And if you do remember, under end-to-end tests of the Jetpack Compose application, we need to access the trailing icon. Therefore, I'm going to create an accessibility identifier. We don't need a preview here. Now we have to create those under the initializer. Let's initialize them in the init. Now let's go to the implementation. And because this is an optional property, I'm going to do here if lit. In other words, if it's provided, we're going to show here the image from leading icon name. For the bundle, it's going to be module. And let's specify here the foreground color. If this text field has an error under the validation, going to surround this red color, going to change basically the border color to red. If it's not, we're going to specify another border color has error and the border color as reusable as possible. It should be optional. Maybe you're not interested in validation after all. And for the border color, by default, let's assign gray, and let's initialize this under the initializer has error and border color. Now, if we have an error, theme, an error, otherwise border color. Now, underneath the group view, we have to add the progress indicator. If is processing, we're going to show the progress view and accessibility identifier. After the progress indicator, the clearable button. At least the value is not empty. And clearable, it is a button. For the action, first of all, I have to set the value to empty string and call on clear click. And for the content, an image, I'm gonna choose this one, and the foreground icon's color. Now let's show the trailing icon. This particular one should be a clickable view. Therefore, I'm gonna use button. I'm gonna copy this for the action, which is trailing icon action, trailing icon name, foreground color, icon's color. And we have to add here the accessibility identifier for testing purposes, trailing icon accessibility identifier. I'm gonna fold it, and we need to put everything within the hstack. I'm gonna fold this, and I will fold the hstack. Some padding. Let's not hard code this. I'm gonna call it inner padding. For the background. I would like to customize here the corner radius. I would like here to add a border around this particular component or a view. Therefore, I'm going to use overlay. I will use the rounded rectangle with a corner radius. I will specify here the stroke, and it has to vary from whether we have an error under validation or not by doing has error, error from theming, and otherwise border color. And for the line width, border width, and I would like to apply here an overall padding horizontally and vertically. All right, let's define those needed properties. The inner padding is of type CGFloat, and corner radius and border width, those values should be optional. Let's initialize those values here, and we are done. We need to add the feedback message for validation, and I will surround this with VStack because underneath I'm gonna put my text field showing the feedback message, error content. Let's make it optional. Now, if we have an error, this should be nullable, to be honest, and this error content is not null. I'm going to show a text font. Let's do, for example, label small, foreground color, error. Let's add some padding, max width, infinity, and alignment, leading, and I have to provide here a fixed size, horizontally false, and vertically true, forcing the line break. And that's pretty much it for the text input. It requires some implementations, but it's not that complicated. I'm gonna create here a private structure, and let's use the text input. For the value, it is the binding value. Therefore, I have to use the $sign. And label, let's do, for example, email. The leading icon name, it's gonna be email outline, as well as the trailing icon name. Let's say, for example, the magnify icon. The state of is processing, has error. It should be has error. The error content or the feedback message content should be, for example, email is required. And on change, whenever the text field change or the value of the text field change, let's add here parameter new value. First of all, going to check or to store the value of has error to new value is empty. And I would like to simulate here the text. Don't worry about the error, going to put the arguments in the correct order. But here we're going to change the is processing from false to true by doing task. If the new value is not empty, I'm going to toggle first of all is processing from false to true, and we will delay the operation by doing await task sleep in nanosecond. Let's do, for example, 1.7 seconds. After we're going to do is processing and toggle. All right, we have just to put here this in the correct order. All right, this is the correct order. Now let's show this particular preview, uncomment this. All right, basically this is our text input. Let's, for example, type something. We have the progress indicator. After 1.7 seconds, it's gonna disappear, mimicking basically what's gonna happen in our application. Let's delete everything, and we have the feedback message, which is a little bit small, but it's gonna look good actually in our device. If you're not satisfied with this font size, just change the font size, which is not basically the scope of our tutorial. I think it's good. You can basically here override icons color. I think it's fine. I like how it's presented, and the thing is that it's missing here basically is the floating label. Don't worry guys, we're going to implement this in the WPF and you're going to suffer, I guarantee this. If you do remember, we have the header section. We did not implement this header section preview. I have prepared a preview in advance in order to simulate a little bit what we're going to expect in our application. Just to simulate the layout of the other application, we have the logo and the text input, and this is just a simulation of the user menu when the user is authenticated, and we can see here basically the typing text. And that's gonna wrap up our today's video. For the next tutorial, we will build the first feature, the product feature. I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next one, and happy coding!